I'm Alex Radical from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Coexist from Matago. Coexist is a 2 to 4 player game of tableau building in which players are trying to preserve various animal species. The general idea of the game is you're going to be taking one of 3 core actions in the game as you try to gather various cards, as you gather various caretakers, which are going to be how you help the cards, and then as you try to preserve those animal species, or occasionally if you aren't able to, releasing those animals into the wild, getting some perks but also some negative brownie points. Are negative brownie points a thing? Before we dive into this is a prototype, rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. Also, the crowdfunding campaign ends in like 2 days because I just got this game while at UKGE, so I was only able to just dive into it. But with that said, let's go ahead and teach you loosely how to play, and then go into my thoughts and opinions. In the game, like I said already, you're taking one of 3 core actions. At the beginning of the game, you're going to take, well, also some of the actions are subdivided, which makes it a bit more complicated than it might seem, but let's start with the basic main action you're going to be taking, where you either are going to take caretakers from the board. You're going to gather those caretaker cards, taking those from the supply and putting them onto your board. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. Alternatively, you can take up to 10 points worth of animals. You have the points in the top right corner. These are not the end game points, to be clear. This is their wilderness score or something like that, but you get 10 points up of worth of those. So for example, I could take these 2 cards over here because 5 and 9 equals, well, 5 and 4 equals 9, and I can place them down onto my board. So you're doing one of those 2 actions, caretakers or taking the animal species. Now, the reason you're going to want to do that is because I'll walk you through a few turns over here to show you what it looks like, but the general idea, what you're trying to do is on the top row of each of these cards, there's the requirements of what you need to do to preserve those animal species. There's their wilderness score on the top right, which again defines how many you can take, and then top left they have an ability as well as their points at the end of the game. So for example, if I'm trying to get 3 oranges and 1 blue, and those are specifically the caretakers over here, then I'm going to try to take these cards. Let's go ahead and take these cards as my first action, and then we're going to go ahead and refill the display. That's action 1. Now I'm going to walk you through all this over here, but this sets up the other player for a strong caretaker action. They're going to take all the caretakers from the board, and they're going to take those associated markers, place them onto various spots. As you can see, these spots hold both caretakers and cards, and you're working with only those 5 spots to be able to do everything you want. We'll sweep those caretakers because we've just taken them over here. You can only have 1 color in each spot, so I can't save space like this, so you have to be mindful as far as how you gather those things, but we are going to go ahead and refill the display. I should note you use the decks from the players that are in play, so the more players you have, the more cards you have in these decks, and the more variety of the cards as well. But so over here, we're back to this player over here. Again, if they're trying to discard, they're going to need some orange and a blue. We have an orange and a blue over here. They could take them. Honestly, it's not the craziest because we don't want to let the other player get too strong of a stranglehold on those caretakers, but as you can see, we are running out of space to take any of the actions we need. Back to the second player, as you can see, there are no caretakers, so they can start looking to see which animals they think they can fulfill with what they have. And they have 2 purple, a blue, and an orange. And as you can see over here, a lot of those require different things, but over here specifically, we have 2 purple, a blue, and orange. This looks like a great species to take, but in this corner over here, they also need a green, and greens are the hardest to get. The caretakers have a staggered aspect of how rare they are, how important they are, and that's going to go from left to right, from the least to most important. These, by the way, are not caretakers. We'll talk about these soon. We have orange, blue, purple, and green. Green being the most valuable and the hardest to get. So right now, we will take this card over here, placing it over here. We have another 5 that we can spend, and we're going to want to gather something that gives us green. We haven't talked about the lower half of these cards, but the lower half are what the cards will give you when you release them into the wild. I think we'll take this one over here because this one has a lower penalty for us. We'll explain that in a second. Placing that onto our board, it's another 5 value, so that was a efficient action as far as taking what we need. Back to this play over here. Oh my gosh, these 2 are perfect again for us. We'll take those 2 because they fit perfectly into the spots we already have. You know, it's always a little bit about being efficient in terms of what you need right now versus being efficient with what you can store and hold onto. Back to this player over here. So what they're going to do is they're going to take the second core action. Again, the first core action is either taking caretakers or taking animals. The second core action is a variety of various management things. There's 3 specific things you can do. One of those things is going to be taking these tokens, place them onto cards. So for example, we're going to take this token over here, these 2, placing them over here in order to fulfill those, that clears up the space. So you can move the caretakers over to the cards that need them based on that top row over here, clearing up the space for more things. But you can take as many of these actions. Unlike the first action, we have to pick or choose either caretakers or animals. Your second action type, that management action, lets you do a bunch of things, and you can do them all in any different combinations. So for example, I move these here, but I'm also going to release this animal to the wild. When you release an animal to the wild, you're going to get the resources underneath them. Now again, they're going to go into various spots. It's worth noting you're allowed to overfill during your turn. At the end of your turn, though, it all has to fit. But we gather those 3, but we also get one of these. These are bad things. They limit our ability to gather more cards. You can see right now we're blocking this 10, so now we can only take 9 points of animals in one action from the board. Usually not that much of a constriction, but things will get tighter as you go. Additionally, at the end of the game, when you cover these, you're going to be reducing the amount of points you get. So these are going to restrict you what you can do, and they're going to cost you points at the end of the game. We take that, we put that over there, and now we have these over here, so we can take this and put it down there. And that brings us to the third action you can do, which we can now go ahead and preserve this animal. Now that we've fulfilled those rows, we're going to go ahead and put these back into display because we've built enough to go ahead and preserve this animal. We've assigned enough caretakers, and we're going to slot it underneath our board where we get access to that ability. This specific ability is an ongoing ability that is always in play, and it's going to allow us, whenever we release an animal into the wild, which again isn't great, but at least is a pro to it. In this case, we're actually going to reduce one of these tokens. This is a great early game card that's really going to help my ability to release animals into the wild for getting those bunch of caretakers all at once while not being as penalized. Keeping in mind that in some cases you're going to get multiple tokens, so if I get 2 tokens and only get rid of 1, there's still a cost, but if I can find those ones where you only get penalized by 1, that buys me a lot of flexibility with no cost. That is a great early game card. Honestly, I've gotten that card before, but I've never gotten it so early into the engine. This game's going really well for, I was about to say me, but both players, so for me, the orange player. That's going to be the second main action you can take. So again, you've now seen 2 of the 3 actions. Action 1, take a caretakers or take animals. Action 2, a bunch of management actions, but mostly moving caretakers around, releasing animals into the wild to get more things, and then releasing or preserving animals when you've fulfilled their needs. And that brings us to the third action, which is kind of generally a trading action. The trading action just allows you to trade caretakers. You can always go down in value at a 1-for-1 ratio. Going up in value costs you a bit more. For example, if you need a purple caretaker and you have a green, you can simply swap that green for a purple. You can swap the green for anything lower than it because you can always go down at a 1-to-1 ratio. But if you need something else, let's say I need another purple, I could trade these 2 blue in to get another purple. So you can make as many trades as you want, adjusting the various caretakers you have. That is the third action type you can do. You're going to be doing this little cycle of gathering cards, taking actions to move things around, taking actions to trade your caretakers until eventually one player has preserved their 5th animal. On the player board over here, they're going to preserve their 5th animal, and that will trigger endgame, making sure all players have an even number of turns, at which point you'll score up the points from the animals that you've preserved. Your specialty point, each board has a specialty power, and then the points of whatever has not been covered on these, and that is going to be your score in Coexist. Which brings me to my thoughts on this, and this is going to be fairly quick as far as reviews go, but I'm going to cover just what I like, don't like, can see others not liking, as I usually do. But as far as what I like in the game, first of all, the art is really striking. This game is done by, I believe it's a street artist if I'm not mistaken, and they've used his art in the game, so I don't know if it's all his original art, meaning I believe it's all his original art. I don't know if it's all his original street art that they've incorporated into the game, if he specifically made new pieces for the game, but either way, it does have a very striking art style, which fits in nicely with this game, but also just looks beautiful to look at. But more importantly, because art is nice, but is the game good? More importantly, as far as the mechanics that I like, the main thing that has me interested in this is the combination of the abilities. So you have all these abilities. Sometimes they're going to be one-time abilities, which can be very helpful. Getting rid of 2 of those is great. But alternatively, I really like the ongoing abilities because you can build up a nice staggering aspect of how many different things you can do. And granted, you only really get 5 because once you get your 5th, the game's over. But it's surprising how many combinations you can have as far as what it is you can do with a handful of ongoing abilities. You can have an ability that gives you a blue caretaker every single turn. You can also have another ability that treats blues as if they're purple on a 1-for-1 swap, which lets you move up to a high level. Combine those 2, and basically you have a bunch of extra resources coming in, extra caretakers coming in every single turn. This one over here is going to give this player a ton of agency over gathering species, releasing them into the wild, and honestly, there are more of these cards. Get this one as well. If you're able to get this one over here, every time you release into the wild, you're going to get 2 green and discard that. This combination early on would be insanely powerful and is worth pursuing this. Like, his next turn should immediately be getting that card to be able to work their way towards that ability combination, because even if it slows them down initially while they try to pursue it, they very likely will be very set up for success once they get that combo in play. And so trying to find a handful of combinations while trying to manage with very limited real estate over here. That's the main problem you have, is you only have a handful of slots, and you're trying to fit your animals and your caretakers into those handfuls of spots, and it is tight. It is hard to make it all work, and you'll frequently have to make what seems like less efficient moves as you try to juggle it all. Spending an entire turn trading in your various caretakers sometimes feels like a waste, but if it clears your board up and allows you to work towards what you're trying to do, that's the main crux of the gameplay. So a handful of abilities that are going to work nicely for you, tight decisions as far as how you manage your board, that's the main thing that keeps Coexist interesting. As far as what I don't like in the game, I kind of touched upon it a little bit over there, which is the idea that sometimes you are just doing very little on your turn. There are moments during the game, whenever I've played this, there have been moments in the game where I'm trying to work towards something, but my board is full and there's only so much I can do, and I can't keep releasing animals because it's going to clog my board down here. And so sometimes you're just working with way too little real estate, and you have a handful of turns in a row where you just feel like you're not doing that well. It does all even out nicely. Again, the tightness of the game allows you to feel rewarded when you have everything working for you, but there are times where you'll be taking turns that just feel like it's not enough space to do what you want, and so in those moments it can feel a bit too tight. As far as I can see, others not liking, first of all, there's definitely luck of the draw as far as the caretakers, the way these cards come out, and whether someone has a strong turn where I go ahead and, like, you know, I take these two animals, or whichever two animals, I mean, these are too high for me, but let's say I could take them, I take these two animals, put them on my board, and suddenly you draw two purple caretakers, or whatever it is. You do have times in the game where you get way too much, where somebody can just get the luck of the draw on the caretakers. That's certainly something that will happen. Hopefully it evens out, but especially early game, because of how powerful the abilities can be when sequenced together, sometimes that luck of the draw early game can lead to a player just having a bit of a runaway tableau working for them. And secondly, it takes a little bit to get used to the flow. I'd say about half a game, but the first half of the game, the whole aspect of each card having a top half that you're trying to fulfill and a bottom half that it trades in, it all works nicely, but it's not immediately intuitive. I have found both learning it and teaching it that it's not immediately intuitive as far as how the cycle and system works. It is very smooth and streamlined. I will say it can benefit from player aids. This is a prototype. There were no player aids. I hope there are in the final version, but it can benefit from player aids, both in terms of the abilities or even just the turn structure and stuff like that. But overall, it is very streamlined as you get up to speed. But I have found that those first few turns, both in my first game as well as teaching others, it's a weird situation because it is surprisingly straightforward and streamlined once you get used to it, but not so obvious until you get used to it. As far as final thoughts on Coexist, overall this is a fun game. This is a fun game with great vibrant art, but more importantly, gameplay that's going to be pretty quick. I think this game plays, I don't know what the box says. Box says 30 minutes. I think it's probably on par, but it's a quick enough game experience, giving you a lot of tight decisions, a few ways of combining abilities that can make you feel powerful. I do almost wish you could have like a longer board. I like the short playtime, but it'd be interesting to see like how much cooler could it be if you were playing till 7 abilities. Like how much more comboing can you go on, and is the game even that much longer? You could just house rule that if you want. I don't know how balanced that is. I haven't tried, but again, the amount I get done with 5 makes me wonder how much more interesting it would be with a bit more. But all that said, this is a 3.5 out of 5. I've enjoyed this one. This is Coexist by Matagot. As far as other game recommendations, a game that had a very similar feel to me, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly why, but Century Spice Road, or alternatively Century Golem Edition, that has a very similar arc as far as trying to gather resources, managing a tight space of storage, while trying to work your way towards a handful of things that are going to score for you. The games felt very similar as far as the pacing and structure of them, while mechanically being different, so I'm going by feels in this one. And then if you want a game that's going to allow you to collect a whole bunch more animals with vibrant artwork, definitely check out Wingspan or Wormspan or Finspan. I think Wormspan is the most interesting of those, but I do think Finspan is the most straightforward of those. Wingspan, in a weird way, is the most popular, but probably my least favorite from those 3 games. But anyways, until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.